start there with that quote, okay, which is parenting in the present moment. No matter how chaotic or uncertain parenting can feel, there is one idea that we should not hold lightly. There is just one thing that we should remain deeply, fundamentally, and consistently committed to, no matter who our kids are, or who we are, or how often we disagree, and that is our connection to our children. And I start there because the relationship that you have with your child, I truly believe needs to be maintained at all costs, okay? And that there are some things that we need to let go when we are interacting with our children in order to maintain that relationship. Hi, okay, I think I have a desk here and there, although there is a chair back there if you'd like to just sit in the big chair. You got lucky.
Yeah.
So maintaining that relationship is a lot to do with being a mindful parent. Because being a mindful parent means that we are parenting in the present moment, being present on purpose, non-judgmentally. And that allows us to respond to our children thoughtfully rather than react, okay? And so I'll be referring back to that several times tonight in terms of why we want to parent in the present moment, being aware of ourselves and being aware of our children and how that dynamic takes place, okay? So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'd like you to start. We ask these of all of our students when they come in, when we start to teach SEL, social emotional learning, okay? And when I start to introduce mindfulness. So I'm just going to ask you both to just make two fists. Look at that. And I'm going to ask you to open one finger every time you answer yes to one of my questions, okay? This is called Have You Ever? So have you ever said something you wish you could take back? Have you ever been so angry you felt a little out of control? Have you ever been so worried that you couldn't think straight? Have you ever felt disorganized or a little forgetful? Have you ever been presented with an issue you had no idea how to solve? Have you ever raised your voice a little too loud? Have you ever done something that you later regretted? So just raise your hand if you answered yes to one. And so we all have answered yes to those and been in those situations, okay? And being a mindful parent can help us better manage what all of those are like, okay? And I'm going to take you through a process, just a brief activity to get us started. It is a mindful activity, and it's about just being aware. It's called STAY. This is similar. If you look around for the social emotional, there are posters that you'll see one in the hall. It'll say the meta moment. Has anybody seen the meta moment in the hall? So it's a 6 pictures of 6 little guys, and it's called the meta moment. And we teach all of our students how to take a meta moment. In fact, they'll say, why don't you take a meta moment? Okay? And really that just is very similar to this activity called STAY. Okay? And it's being able to stop, take a breath, assess. Okay? So I'm going to have you just stop for a moment and think of a situation, maybe remembering a situation with a child, with your children and yourself. It might have been a difficult interaction. So just bring that to mind for one. And imagine being in that situation. And if you had been able to use this, you would have just stopped just stop. Stop the interaction. And once you've stopped, I want you to take 2 deep breaths right now. Just take a deep breath. Another deep breath. Start to feel a shift. We look at our students to take that shift. And the A stands for just assess what you're thinking. What are your thoughts in this situation? How are your thoughts making you feel? What does your body feel like? Dropping your shoulders just a little bit more. Once you have a pretty good idea of where you're coming from, where your thoughts and feelings are coming from in this situation, now move your awareness to your child or your children. What is going on for them? What do you notice in them? What do you notice about what's going on around you? And being mindful, present with that interaction in that situation. And once you're fully aware of what's coming up for you and what you believe is coming up for your children, then you can use the Y for yield. And yield is about accepting what is going on, no matter how irritating it is, no matter how challenging it is, no matter how unpleasant it is. Once we have come to terms with the reality of that situation, we can decide how to respond. Considering the metaphor of moving onto a highway where you need to yield to the traffic, if you were to just jump in and react, it would create mayhem. We need to yield, be aware, and move thoughtfully into that situation. Being a mindful parent allows you to respond so that you can respond thoughtfully. What's even more important when you do that, if you do it in front of your children, is modeling is your greatest teacher ever. What you model in front of your children will be who they become. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, and maybe not next week, but I can guarantee you, when they go off to college, it will be who they become. Okay? So that's just called stay. Sometimes that can take 30 seconds, depending on the trigger, depending on where you are, depending on what you're doing. Or it can take 5 to 10 minutes. Or I have had experiences where it has taken me more than an hour to manage a worry that I could not handle. Okay? And we work through that. And that will happen to you too when your child leaves your home and goes away. So I invite you to just be aware that when we can practice that in any situation, and I highly recommend anywhere you are. I started practicing it first when I stopped at a red light. You know, every time I stopped at a red light, oh, I'm just gonna stop. Because typically you'd be like, oh my gosh, change that light. So just take that breath, assess how you are, enjoy the moment, and then you have time to move forward. Okay? And you can do that stay in positive situations as well as difficult ones. Okay? It's about being awake and aware on purpose, moment to moment, non-judgmentally, so that you can respond rather than react to your children. Okay? So then why do we want to be able to do that? Here's just a quote by Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response there is a space, and in our response lies our growth and freedom. When we can pause during any situation, we give ourselves the opportunity to see our best self. You'll hear that a lot in your children. When they come home, they will be learning, who do you want to be in your best self? Okay? What is your best self? How do you want others to see you? How do you want your interaction with your children to be? Okay? And how do you get to be your best self? So one of the more important things that I would like to share as a parent that I have come to understand is that there is two states that we can put our children in. There is the thinking state and there is an emotional state, okay? And physiologically, the emotional state, which is our amygdala, when it is triggered, the thinking state, our prefrontal cortex, shuts down. So our children are no longer able to think, learn, decide, respond, or remember if they are emotional, okay? And that emotion can come from worry, anxiety, anger, frustration, being overwhelmed, okay? Wanting revenge, whatever it is, okay? That emotion is there. And when that happens, they're not able to think. And we have a lot to do with their emotional state, I believe. Because, again, we need to model being grounded and being pretty stable and calm, okay, in their presence. Your children in middle school, as I'm sure they are now, they will come home and be emotional, all right? Something is going to happen that triggers them. They're going to want to shout about it, cry about it. Even if they come home and you see behaviors that are difficult, my guess is that something went on in school that created a difficult time, okay? And how we react to that is going to be really important. And you've heard the metaphor, I'm sure, that when your child is drowning in a wave of emotion, you are standing solid on the beach, okay? And you're just helping them move through that emotional place, okay? And that's where we want to be with our kids. How we respond to them, how we interact with them, we want to keep them thinking. When we go back to that, your relationship is the most important piece, okay? That relationship, you know, you do have no control over your children. Unfortunately, you only have control over yourself, okay? You have significant influence over your children, okay? And so your relationship and your influence will only be as powerful as your relationship. You have a strong relationship with them, and what you believe, what you expect, how you behave, how you act, what you model, they will follow, okay? But that takes a long time to create. And your job is really just to create it prior to going to college, okay? And that's how long you have. Because you want your voice in your child's head, I guarantee you, when they leave the house and go to college, okay? So keeping them in that emotional, out of that emotional state, and keeping in that thinking state as much as possible, okay? So it may be deciding when you're going to interact about a subject and when you're not. Probably the most important thing to remember is that when they've come home and their homework is emotional, if you create more emotion around it, it will create they're not going to be able to answer your questions, they're not going to be able to think straight, they're going to say, I don't know, how come my child is coming home and she doesn't know, you know? That's really important to realize that if they're emotional at all, worried, anxious, frustrated, scared, they're not going to be able to answer the questions the way you want them to. They're not going to be able to think straight, okay? So no, you just, if there's going to be an emotional interaction and you want learning to be going on, you need to disengage for that time period and say, no problem, we'll come back to this when we're both in a better place, okay? Just don't try to teach them anything through an emotional place, okay? The other really important thing that I want to emphasize tonight is to validate your children, okay? This means to simply make sure that your child is being heard when they come home and share something with you, okay? They're going to come home and share that the teacher doesn't like me. She's not calling out my name, okay? Or my best friend doesn't like me anymore. Or I'm never going to make it through this class or sixth grade, or I can't pass that test, or whatever the emotion is that they're coming home and sharing, okay? I have learned that for middle schoolers, it is monumental to them that to us might seem trivial, okay? And if we trivialize it, then we'll make it even bigger for them, because they will feel that they've got to make it louder and louder for you to really understand that this is very hard, okay? The most important thing to remember about validating your child when they come home and share something with you is that it doesn't mean you're agreeing with them. When you're listening to them say, the teacher hates me, she won't call me, she doesn't like me, and you're listening to them and validating, wow, it sounds like your teacher doesn't like you, that doesn't feel really good. That's gotta be hard to go through the day. Tell me more. That doesn't mean I agree that your teacher doesn't like you, okay? There's a big difference, okay? They don't want you. My daughter did not want me solving her problems. I can remember going to bed at night, listening to her. She would share about something that happened during the day that made her upset, sad, discouraged, and I would listen. And what I wanted to do was give advice and tell her, you know, how to solve it or how to change it, okay? Because that's our initial, that's what we do as parents. We want to help take them out of this pain and this situation that they're in. And that is not what we should be doing in that moment, okay? Remember, if they're emotional, they will not hear what you have to say about advice or support or help, okay? Help them through that emotion. Validate you hear them. Encourage them to tell you more. Let me hear more about it. What else do you want to share? Okay? Until you can see them settling a little bit, because the more they share, the more they will settle. And then you can say, would you like to talk more about it right now, or would you want to take a break for a minute? Okay? I also strongly recommend that if you want to give advice, that you ask, can I give you some advice? Okay? Because they don't really want your advice when they're telling you what they're telling you. But they do want you to be there and hear, and they do want your help. They may not want it right in that moment. And maybe they will if you ask. Do you want to know what I would do? No, you don't understand. They really believe that you don't have the answers, and that's okay. Say, no problem. Let me know if you change your mind. Okay? And come back to it later. Really, really important. Doesn't mean you agree, it means I hear you. The more they can know that you are hearing them, and you're not going to jump in that wave with them, they will share a lot. I guarantee you, I hear students every single day when I say, did you tell your mom? Did you tell your dad? Oh, I couldn't. Why couldn't you? Because they're just too overwhelmed, they'll overreact, they don't get it, they can't understand. They need to understand. They need to go home and be able to tell you. So stay on shore and just listen and know that this will pass, okay? And obviously, if it comes again and again and again and again, then you would do something to support them. But usually I have kids coming to me, it's the worst day ever, my friends are breaking up, it's awful, you gotta help me. I said, okay, so tomorrow morning, let's meet and I'll help you. Next morning, it's all fine. I say, okay. Okay, another one that I find is really important in the teaching that I've done for a long time is to pay more attention to what they do well and less attention to what they don't do well. It's really important. Okay? When we are paying attention to what our children's gifts are, what they're good at, what they like to do, what they're interested in, okay? Then they will feel good about those decisions of what they're interested in and that you have that interaction and that relationship. And I can pretty much guarantee you that it will increase the odds that they will do better in the areas they don't do well in. Because children do better when they feel better. And if you're paying attention to what they do well, they will feel better. Okay? So when they bring home the report card, or they look on Power School and you see where the grades are, focus on all the A's that they did get and how they got them and what that was like for them. Okay? Because if you worry more about what they don't do well, they will worry less about it. Okay? But paying attention to what they do well, they will want to do more of that. And when they do more of what they do well, they feel better about themselves. And when they feel better about themselves, they will try in the areas where they don't do well. Okay? You all have kids with gifts, with things they do well, and things that they're good at, that they're really interested in. Okay? And the likelihood that a child can be gifted or do really well in all five is pretty rare.